The bridge of the Indomitable was a cathedral of cold light and polished metal. Captain Alex Kim stood on the command deck, his hands clasped behind his back, and watched the star-dusted blackness on the main view screen. It was a beautiful, peaceful sight, but he knew it was a lie. A terrible, hungry lie was about to tear its way into their reality. The air on the bridge was cool and recycled, tasting of ozone and the faint, metallic tang of the ship's life support systems. Around him, officers moved with quiet efficiency, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of their consoles. Each station was a masterpiece of Catherian engineering, designed to give its operator absolute control over a small piece of the galaxy. From here, Alex could command the ship's powerful engines, its formidable shields, and its enough weaponry to turn a planet to molten glass. Yet, a feeling of helplessness had been growing in him for weeks. He was a captain in the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known, but he felt like a man waiting for a tsunami. "Status report, Lieutenant Park," Alex said, his voice calm and even. It was a voice he had practiced for years, a voice that never showed fear. Lieutenant Jessica Park looked up from her tactical display. Her screen was a complex web of shifting lines and glowing symbols that only a trained officer could decipher. "No change, Captain. The Xylos Vanguard is holding its course and speed. They will exit hyperspace at the edge of the Viridian system in 9 minutes and 40 seconds. Alex nodded slowly. The Xylos. Just the name was enough to make a seasoned officer's skin crawl. They were not a civilization in the way the Catherian Empire was. They had no art, no philosophy, no cities. They were a plague, a collective of biomechanical horrors that existed only to consume. They devoured starships, stripped planets bare, and absorbed any technology they found into their own ever-growing, ever-changing fleet. Fighting them was like trying to punch a swamp. For every ship you destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place, driven by a mindless, relentless hunger. From his command chair, Admiral Marcus Thorne watched the same screen with a hard, unreadable expression. The Admiral was a man carved from granite, a symbol of the Empire's unshakable strength. He believed in the Empire's power the way a priest believed in his god. To him, the Xylos were just another problem to be solved with superior firepower. Predictable beasts. Thorne grumbled, his voice a low rumble. They never learn. They think their numbers can overwhelm Catherian discipline. They are wrong. He turned his gaze to the communications officer. Signal the fleet. Execute formation Aegis Wall. All ships, prepare to fire on my command. A chorus of "Aye, Admiral" echoed across the bridge. The Aegis Wall was the Empire's standard defensive posture against a frontal assault. It was a wall of steel and energy, interlocking fields of fire designed to break any enemy charge. It was powerful, it was effective, and it was completely static. Alex felt that knot of unease tighten in his stomach. The Xylos were a tidal wave. You did not stop a tidal wave by building a wall in front of it. You either got out of the way or you were swept away. He walked over to Jessica's station. "Show me the predictive models," he asked quietly. Jessica tapped a few commands, and a new simulation appeared on her screen. It showed the Catherian fleet, a collection of brilliant blue icons arranged in a perfect, unbroken line. Then, from the edge of the screen, a wave of red icons, the Xylos crashed against it. The red symbols burst into digital explosions, but they kept coming, pouring through the gaps in the blue line, their numbers seemingly endless. The model predicted heavy losses for the Empire before the Vanguard was finally stopped. "They're just machines." "Captain," Jessica said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "But they're very, very good at what they do. They don't care if they die," Alex murmured, watching the simulation. "That's the advantage we can never beat. Then, we will make them die so many times that they run out of bodies," Admiral Thorne said, having walked up behind them without a sound. He placed a heavy hand on Alex's shoulder. "Do not doubt the Empire, Captain. Our records are 10,000 years long. We have cataloged every threat, every species, every possible outcome. There is nothing new under the sun. We have a solution for everything." Alex wanted to believe him. The entire Catherian way of life was built on that belief. Their vast libraries contained the history of the galaxy. Their science explained every phenomenon. Their military cataloged the weakness of every foe. To be a Catherian was to know. But as Alex looked at the endless, mindless red wave on the screen, he felt a flicker of doubt for the first time in his career. Suddenly, a soft, insistent chime cut through the tense silence of the bridge. It was not the alarm for an enemy attack. It was the sound for an unknown sensor contact. Jessica's fingers flew across her console. "Admiral, I have a new signature." It just appeared. Thorne frowned. "A Xylos scout? Cloaked?" "No, sir," Jessica said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's not a Xylos signature. It's not anything I've ever seen." She looked up, her eyes wide with confusion. "It's small, sir. Smaller than a frigate. It has no transponder, no identifying marks. It's not in our records." A hush fell over the bridge. An officer at the navigation console spoke up, his voice shaky. "Admiral, its course. It's not heading for us. It's heading directly for the projected emergence point of the Xylos fleet." On the main view screen, a single tiny green dot appeared, moving at an impossible speed. It was a lone ship, racing towards a storm that was about to consume an entire star system. It was an insect flying into a fire. "What is it?" Alex whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Admiral Thorne's face darkened with anger. The unknown was an insult to his orderly universe. "A smuggler running the blockade? A fool looking for a quick death? It doesn't matter. Ignore it. All attention on the Xylos. They are the only threat that matters." But as Alex Kim watched that small, green dot hurtle towards the void where the enemy would soon appear, he had a terrible, sinking feeling that the Admiral was wrong. For the first time in 10,000 years, something was happening that was not in the records. And in a galaxy built on certainty, the unknown was the most dangerous thing of all. The view screen shimmered as the Xylos fleet began to tear its way into normal space, a nightmare of twisted metal and chitin, just as the lone green ship reached them. The battle was about to begin, but everyone on the bridge of the Indomitable was staring at the one thing they could not understand. The silence on the bridge of the Indomitable was shattered by Admiral Thorne's furious voice. "All batteries, open fire! Show these beasts the fury of the Empire." His command echoed through the vast chamber, a roar of pure authority that broke the spell of the unknown ship. The officers, momentarily frozen by confusion, snapped back to their training. The familiar task of war was a comfort, a return to the world they understood. The main view screen erupted in a symphony of destruction. Brilliant blue lances of energy, thick as starships, shot out from the Catherian fleet. Hundreds of plasma torpedoes, glowing like miniature suns, streaked across the blackness. The Aegis wall held firm, a line of disciplined, overwhelming power. The Xylos vanguard, a chaotic swarm of jagged, organic-looking ships, met the onslaught head-on. Vessels exploded into silent, brilliant clouds of gas and metal. Chitinous armor plates cracked and split under the intense heat. For a moment, it seemed the Admiral was right. The Empire's power was absolute, but the Xylos did not break. They did not retreat. For every ship that was vaporized, two more seemed to surge forward to take its place. They were a living tide of claws and cannons, crashing against the unyielding wall of the Catherian fleet. Some of the smaller Xylos vessels, little more than guided missiles with a pilot inside, deliberately slammed into the Cytherian ship's shields, causing them to flicker and dim. It was a battle of attrition, and the Xylos were willing to pay any price. Amidst this titanic clash, the small, unregistered ship, the green dot on their sensors, did something utterly mad. It plunged directly into the heart of the Xylo swarm. It didn't fire a single weapon. It didn't raise its shields in a visible way. It simply flew, weaving through the chaos with an agility that defied the laws of physics. It danced between plasma torpedoes and ducked under laser lances. A ghost in the machine of war. Alex, Kim's eyes were glued to the view screen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The tiny ship was like a hummingbird in a hurricane, moving with a grace and purpose that seemed impossible. "Lieutenant Park," he said, his voice tight. "What is that ship doing? Get me a close-up view." Jessica's hands were a blur on her console. "I'm trying, Captain. Its energy signature is strange. It's there, but it's not like anything I've ever seen. It's not putting out the kind of power needed for those maneuvers." The main view screen shifted, zooming in on the mysterious vessel. It was sleek and angular, colored a dark, non-reflective gray. There were no visible engines, no weapon ports, no markings of any kind. It was as simple and featureless as a stone. As they watched, it flew directly towards a massive Xylos cruiser, a ship the size of a small moon, bristling with spines and cannons. "It's on a collision course," an officer yelled from the navigation pit. "It's going to be destroyed." But it wasn't. Just as the small ship was about to impact the Xylos cruiser's hull, it simply vanished from the view screen for a split second, then reappeared on the other side. It had passed right through the larger ship as if it weren't there. A moment later, the colossal Xylos cruiser went dark. Its glowing red lights flickered and died. The cannons that had been spewing fire a moment before fell silent. The great engine flares at its rear sputtered out. The ship, a terrifying engine of war just seconds before, was now just a dead, floating hulk. "What happened?" Admiral Thorne demanded, storming over to Jessica's station. "Did it fire some kind of weapon we didn't detect?" Jessica shook her head, her face pale with disbelief. She stared at her screen, her eyes wide. "No, Admiral. I'm not reading any weapon discharge. No energy surge. No radiation. Nothing." She looked up at Alex, her voice filled with a mixture of terror and awe. "Captain, it's like the Xylos ship was just turned off." The bridge fell silent again, the sounds of the distant battle fading into the background. Every officer was watching the small gray ship. It moved to another Xylos vessel, a smaller, faster frigate. Again, it flew close, and again, without any visible effect, the Xylos ship went dead. Its lights died, its weapons fell silent, and it drifted aimlessly. "It's a virus," Alex whispered, the horrifying thought taking shape in his mind. "A computer virus delivered by some kind of proximity pulse." "I don't think so, Captain," Jessica said, her voice barely a whisper. "A virus would affect their systems. It would cause malfunctions, maybe even make them self-destruct. This is different. This is clean. It's like someone reached inside and pulled the power cord out of the wall." One by one, the Xylos ships were neutralized. The small gray ship moved through the swarm with terrifying efficiency. It was not a warrior. It was a shepherd, and the Xylos fleet was its flock. It moved from ship to ship, and with each pass, another enemy vessel became a lifeless tomb. The Xylos, for the first time since their arrival, seemed to hesitate. Their collective mind, driven by simple hunger and aggression, could not comprehend this new threat. How do you fight an enemy that doesn't fight back? How do you destroy something that won't let you destroy it? Within 5 minutes, it was over. The entire Xylos vanguard, a force that would have cost the Cytherian fleet hours of brutal fighting and significant losses, was rendered completely inert. The space around the planet Viridian 7 was now a graveyard of dead ships, a silent testament to a power the Empire could not understand. The small gray ship hung in the center of the graveyard it had created, silent and unmoving. It had not fired a single shot. It had not lost a single drop of its own hypothetical blood. It had won. The bridge of the Indomitable was deathly quiet. The crew stared at the view screen, their faces masks of shock and confusion. The relief they should have felt was absent, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. The Xylos were a known enemy. They were monsters, but they were monsters in the Empire's catalog. You knew how to fight a monster. You knew how to kill it, but this was something else entirely. This was a power that operated on a level they couldn't even grasp. It was a magic trick performed on a galactic scale. Admiral Thorne's face was a mask of fury and fear. His belief in the Empire's absolute supremacy had been shaken to its core. His carefully ordered universe had just been proven to be terribly, frighteningly incomplete. Alex Kim looked from the dead Xylos fleet to the small, silent ship that had defeated them. The knot of unease in his stomach had become a block of ice. The Xylos were a threat to their lives. But this unknown ship, this silent, impossible entity, it was a threat to everything they were. It was a threat to their reality. And in that moment, Captain Alex knew that the real war had just begun. The silence on the bridge of the Indomitable was a heavy, suffocating blanket. It was the silence of a worldview shattering. For 10,000 years, the Catherian Empire had built its identity on absolute knowledge. Every star, every species, every possible threat was catalogued, analyzed, and filed away in the vast archives of the core worlds. To be a Catherian was to be certain. But now, that certainty was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow void of the unknown. The small gray ship on the view screen was the physical form of that void. Admiral Thorne was the first to break the silence, his voice a raw nerve of fury. "Hail them, now, on all frequencies. This is Admiral Marcus Thorne of the Catherian starship Indomitable. You are in a restricted military zone. Identify yourselves and state your purpose immediately." His command was a desperate attempt to impose order on the chaos, to force the universe to conform to his rules. The communications officer worked his console, his hands trembling slightly. After a moment, he shook his head. "No response, Admiral. They are not answering. In fact, I'm not even reading an active comm system on their ship. It's like they're not even there." The Admiral's face turned a shade of purple. "They are there. I can see them." He pointed a trembling finger at the view screen. "Target them with a warning shot. A low-yield laser across their bow. Let them know we are not to be ignored." "Admiral, with all due respect," Alex Kim said, stepping forward, his voice steady despite the ice in his veins. "I don't think that's a good idea." Thorne spun on him, his eyes blazing. "And why not, Captain? Are you afraid of upsetting the ghost ship? They just decimated an entire fleet without firing a shot. They are a threat, an unknown, unquantifiable threat that must be brought to heel." "Exactly," Alex said, holding the Admiral's gaze. "They are an unknown. We have no idea what their capabilities are. A warning shot could be interpreted as an act of war. They neutralized the Xylos fleet in 5 minutes. What could they do to us?" The question hung in the air, unanswered and terrifying. The crew of the bridge watched the standoff, their eyes darting between their furious admiral and their calm captain. They were all thinking the same thing. The Empire's most powerful weapons had been rendered useless against the Xylos, but this new entity had made the Xylos useless. Where did that leave them on the galactic food chain? Thorne's anger seemed to deflate, replaced by a cold, calculating fear. He was a man of action, but he was not a fool. He knew Alex was right. To attack that ship was to invite a fate they could not possibly predict. He took a deep breath, composing himself. Fine, we will not fire. But we will not be ignored, either. He turned his gaze back to Alex, and his eyes were hard as steel. Captain Kim, you will take a shuttle and a boarding party. You will go to that vessel. You will make contact. You will find out who they are, where they come from, and how they did what they did. I want answers, Captain. I want that ship and its technology for the Empire. Alex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. Boarding that ship? It felt like being asked to walk into a black hole and take notes. Admiral, a boarding party could be seen as a hostile act. Perhaps we could try to communicate from a distance, offer a trade, or... That was an order, Captain. Thorne interrupted, his voice leaving no room for argument. You are the finest officer I have. If anyone can do this, it's you. You will not engage unless fired upon. You will be diplomatic. But you will go, and you will not return until you have something for me. Dismissed. Alex knew there was no point in arguing. He gave a crisp, formal salute. Yes, Admiral. As he turned to leave the bridge, he caught Jessica Park's eye. She gave him a small, worried look, a silent message of good luck. He nodded to her, then walked off the command deck, his heart heavy with a sense of dread. The news of the event at Veridian 7 spread through the Catherian fleet like a shockwave, and then it jumped across the stars to the core worlds. The Empire panicked. It was not a loud public panic, but a quiet, frantic terror that gripped the highest levels of power. An emergency session of the Imperial Command was called. A meeting of the most powerful admirals and intelligence chiefs in the galaxy. Conducted via secure holographic channels. Admiral Thorne stood before the council. His image projected into the chamber where the Emperor's most trusted advisors sat. He recounted the events, his voice tight with controlled emotion. He described the Zeos fleet, the arrival of the unknown ship, and its impossible, effortless victory. When he was finished, the head of Imperial Intelligence, a stern woman named Alara, spoke. Her voice was sharp and precise. Admiral, you are certain of your crew's observations? I was there, Director, Thorne said. We all saw it. The ship did not fire a weapon. It did not raise shields. It simply disabled the entire Xylos vanguard. Alara looked down at a datapad in front of her. We have run the sensor data from the Indomitable through every analysis system we have. We cross-referenced the ship's design with every known civilization, extinct or extant. Nothing. We analyzed the energy signature of its action. It defies our understanding of physics. It is not in our records. The phrase echoed in the silent chamber. It is not in our records. To the Catherian mind, it was the most terrifying statement imaginable. It was a crack in the foundation of their entire civilization. The Xylos were a known threat, another admiral said, his voice filled with a new kind of fear. We knew how to fight them. We knew what to expect. This is something else. An entity with this level of power, operating outside of all our knowledge. They could be 1,000 years ahead of us. 1,000,000. They could make our entire military obsolete with a thought. The consensus was clear and chilling. The Xylos were a disease, but a known one. You could treat a disease, even if the treatment was painful. This new entity was not a disease. It was an entirely new form of life, a predator that they didn't even know how to identify. The Empire's greatest fear was not a powerful enemy, but an unknown one. An enemy for whom they had no file, no strategy, no defense. Their power was not in their ships or their weapons, but in their records. And for the first time in millennia, they had encountered a blank page. And on that blank page could be written their end. The order was given from the highest level. Find out what it is. find out where it came from. And if it cannot be controlled, it must be eliminated before it even knows we exist. The fate of the galaxy now rested on the shoulders of one man, Captain Alex Kim, who was already on his way to meet the ghost in the machine. The shuttle seeker moved through the graveyard of dead Xylo ships, its small engines a quiet hum against the absolute silence of space. Inside, Captain Alex Kim felt a weight on his shoulders heavier than any planet. He was dressed in a formal officer's uniform, its stiff collar feeling like a restraint. Beside him sat 4 of his best Marines, their faces hidden behind the black visors of their helmets, their pulse rifles held at the ready. They were the best of the Empire, but Alex knew their weapons might as well be sticks and stones against what they were about to meet Dot as they drew closer to the gray ship, which his crew had nicknamed the Ghost. Alex could see it more clearly through the forward viewport. It was even stranger up close. There were no seams, no rivets, no visible plates. It looked like it had been grown, not built. The hull was a single, perfect piece of material that seemed to absorb the light of the distant stars. There were no windows, no antenna, no weapon ports. It was a complete and total mystery. Approaching the designated airlock, "Captain," the shuttle pilot said, his voice tight with tension. "They have opened a hatch for us. No communication, but the door is open." An open door was an invitation, but it felt like a trap. How could a ship so advanced not even have a way to talk? "Take us in, pilot," Alex ordered. "Marines on my mark. Weapons on safe, but be ready. We are here to talk, not to fight." The shuttle glided smoothly into a small, perfectly circular bay. The outer door closed behind them with a soft hiss, and the shuttle's landing gear touched down with a gentle thud. The interior of the bay was just as featureless as the ship's exterior. It was a smooth, white, seamless room with soft, indirect lighting. There were no control panels, no markings, no other ships. It was empty, clean, and utterly alien. "All right," Alex said, taking a deep breath. "Let's go meet our host." The airlock of the shuttle cycled open, and Alex stepped out first, his hands held open and away from his body in a universal gesture of peace. The Marines followed, their weapons still held at a low ready, their heads moving constantly, scanning for threats. The air in the bay was clean and smelled faintly of ozone, like the air after a thunderstorm. It was cool, but not cold. As they moved towards the only door in the room, it slid open silently, revealing a short corridor. At the end of the corridor stood a single figure. Alex's breath caught in his throat. He had prepared himself for anything, a monster of pure energy, a robot, a being of gas and light. He was not prepared for this. The figure was a biped. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. It was wearing a simple one-piece suit of dark blue fabric. Its skin was a pale, pinkish tan color, and it had short, dark hair on its head. Its face was soft. It had no natural armor, no claws, no fangs. It looked fragile, almost weak. It was, Alex realized with a shock, physically inferior to a Catherian. It looked like a creature that should have been hunted to extinction a million years ago on some forgotten world. The being raised a hand, not in a threat, but in a simple, open-palmed greeting. A small metallic disc on its chest glowed with a soft blue light. "Greetings," a voice said. It was calm, and it came from the disc on the being's chest. It was a translation device. "My name is David. I am the captain of this vessel, the Odyssey. You are welcome here." Alex and his Marines froze, their training screaming at them that this was a trick. This soft, unassuming creature was the master of the ship that had disabled an entire fleet? It was impossible. "I am Captain Alex Kim of the Catherian starship Indomitable," Alex said, his voice carefully neutral. "We are here to understand what happened here." "To understand?" "You," David nodded, his expression friendly and open. He did not seem intimidated by the 4 heavily armed soldiers. "Of course. Please, follow me. There is no need for your guards to be so tense. We are not a violent people." Alex hesitated, then gave a subtle nod to his Marines. They lowered their weapons, but did not relax their guard. He followed David down the corridor, his mind racing. This David, was nothing like he had expected. The Empire's records were filled with thousands of species. Some were warriors, some were builders, some were thinkers. But all of them, in one way or another, had struggled for survival. They had evolved claws or intelligence or cunning to face the dangers of their worlds. This creature looked like it had never had to fight a day in its life. David led them to a small room that Alex assumed was the ship's bridge. It was surprisingly small and simple. There were only 2 other beings there, a man and a woman, both looking as soft and unassuming as David. They were seated at simple consoles that glowed with soft light. There were no complex controls, no flashing lights, no overwhelming displays of power. It looked less like a warship's bridge and more like a quiet office. You destroyed the Xylos fleet," Alex said, stating the obvious because he didn't know what else to say. David shook his head. "We did not destroy it. We disabled it. We do not believe in destruction when it can be avoided." The word avoided struck Alex with force. The Empire's entire philosophy was based on the idea of overwhelming force, of eliminating threats so completely they could never rise again. "Who are you?" Alex asked, the question that was burning in the mind of every Cytherian. "What are you? Your species isn't in any of our records. We have cataloged the entire galaxy." A sad, gentle smile touched David's lips. "We are humans, from a planet called Earth. It's very far from here. We've been traveling for a long, long time." Humans. The name meant nothing. It was not in the archives. It was a new word, a new people, a new history. It was the blank page made real. How? Alex asked, his voice filled with genuine wonder and fear. "How did you do that? Your technology is beyond anything we have ever seen. You move through their ships. You turn them off with a thought." David gestured for Alex to look at the main screen, which showed a view of the dead Xeos fleet. "It's not about technology, Captain. Not in the way you mean. It's about understanding." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "The Xylos operate on a specific quantum frequency. Their consciousness, their collective mind, is tied to that frequency. It's how they control their ships, how they think as one. We simply changed the channel." Alex stared at him, his mind struggling to grasp the concept. "You? What?" "We didn't fight their ships," David explained patiently, as if talking to a student. "We disconnected their consciousness from their vessels. We sent out a wave that resonated with their frequency and put their entire collective into a deep sleep. The ships are fine. The pilots are fine. They are just asleep. It's a non-lethal solution we developed after we lost many worlds to them." The revelation hit Alex like a physical blow. It wasn't a weapon. It was a lullaby. These humans, these soft, fragile-looking creatures, were not conquerors. They were not warriors. They were survivors who had achieved a level of scientific and philosophical understanding so profound that war, to them, had become a problem to be solved, not a battle to be won. They didn't hate their enemies. They felt sorry for them. They didn't seek to destroy them. They sought to pacify them. In a galaxy of predators, they had become the ultimate shepherds. And the Cytherian Empire, with all its power and all its knowledge, was just another flock of sheep, unaware that a new shepherd had arrived. The shuttle ride back to the Indomitable was the quietest of Alex Kim's life. The 4 Marines sat in their seats, their helmets off, their faces pale and thoughtful. They had seen something that went beyond their training, beyond their understanding of the universe. They had not met an enemy. They had met a godlike entity that chose to look like a man. Alex stared out the viewport at the silent, gray ship, the Odyssey. It no longer looked like a threat. It looked like a lesson. A lesson the Catherian Empire was not ready to learn. When the shuttle docked and the airlock hissed open, Admiral Thorne was waiting for him on the other side, his face a thundercloud of impatience. "Report, Captain." "Now," he demanded, his voice echoing in the docking bay. Alex walked past him, his stride firm. "Not here, Admiral." "On the bridge." "My full report is for everyone." Thorne's eyes narrowed, but he followed Alex through the corridors of the ship. The crew they passed saw the look on their captain's face and knew something profound had happened. When they arrived on the bridge, Alex dismissed all non-essential personnel, leaving only the senior officers. He walked to the center of the command deck, turned to face the Admiral, and began to speak. He told them everything. He described the humans, their appearance, their ship, their calm demeanor. He recounted David's explanation of the quantum frequency, of putting the Xylos to sleep instead of destroying them. He spoke of their philosophy of non-lethal solutions, of a power so great it didn't need to prove itself. As he spoke, the bridge grew quieter and quieter. The officers listened, their expression shifting from disbelief to confusion, and finally to a dawning primal fear. When Alex was finished, the bridge was silent for a long moment. Admiral Thorne was the first to react, but not with the fury Alex expected. His face was pale, and his voice was a low, dangerous whisper. "They are a greater threat than the Xylos, 1,000 times greater." Alex was not surprised. He had known this would be the Admiral's conclusion. "Admiral, they showed no aggression. They helped us? Helped us?" Thorne laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "They showed us how powerless we are. An empire that can disarm its enemies without firing a shot? That can make our entire military, our entire way of life, obsolete with a thought? They are a poison, Captain. A poison that will destroy everything we have built. They cannot be allowed to exist." The fear in the Admiral's voice was contagious. The other officers on the bridge shifted nervously. Their entire world was based on Catherian supremacy. The idea that another species was not just their equal, but their superior in every way that mattered, was a truth they could not accept. Thorne walked to his command chair, his decision made. "They are a threat to the stability of the galaxy, a threat to the peace we have enforced for 10,000 years. We will strike first. We will strike now, while they are unaware." He looked at the weapons officer. "Target the Odyssey. All batteries. Prepare to fire on my command." A cold dread washed over Alex Kim. This was it. The moment of choice. He was an officer of the Catherian Empire. He had sworn an oath to obey his superiors and protect the Empire. But was this protecting the Empire, or was it destroying its soul? He looked at the main view screen, at the small, quiet human ship. He thought of David's calm face, his sad smile, his talk of peace. To destroy, that would be an act of pure, unreasoning fear. It would be the moment the Empire stopped being a beacon of order and became just another monster in the dark. He could not let it happen. "Admiral, with all due respect, I cannot allow that," Alex said, his voice ringing with a new authority. Thorne's head snapped around, his eyes wide with disbelief and rage. "What did you say, Captain?" "This is mutiny." "No, Admiral," Alex said, his hand moving to the console next to him. "This is my duty. My duty to the truth." He typed in a series of commands with practice speed. "I am transmitting my full report, including all sensor data and my personal logs, to the Imperial Core, to the Emperor himself. He, and only he, will decide the fate of the first species in 1,000 years that doesn't want to kill us." Thorn roared in fury and lunged towards Alex. But two of Alex's own officers, their faces set, stepped in front of the Admiral, blocking his path. They had heard the truth in Alex's voice. They had seen the fear in the Admirals. They chose the captain who had seen the future over the Admiral who was afraid of it. "It's done, Admiral," Alex said, his voice soft but firm. "The data is sent. The fleet is standing by. The decision is out of our hands." Thorn slumped back in his chair, defeated. The bridge was silent, the crew watching their captain, a new respect in their eyes. They had been saved from a terrible mistake, not by a weapon, but by a choice. The final scene took place weeks later in the vast ornate throne room of the Cytherian Emperor. The Emperor was an ancient being, his body frail, but his mind as sharp as a shard of glass. He had ruled for centuries, and he had seen empires rise and fall. He watched the recording of Captain David, listened to his words, and saw the power the humans possessed. His highest advisor, a woman named Alara, stood beside him. "It is not in our records, Your Majesty," she said, her voice filled with the same awe and terror that had gripped the fleet. The Emperor was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on the image of the simple-looking man who commanded a godlike power. He had spent his life maintaining the great, unchanging record of the Cytherian Empire. He had believed that to know everything was to control everything. Now, he was faced with something new, something that could not be categorized or controlled. He could order its destruction, and the Empire could continue to live in its comfortable, certain world. Or he could open the book to a new page, a blank page, and see what was written there. He thought of the centuries of war, of the constant struggle to maintain order, of the fear that had always lurked at the edges of the Empire. And then he thought of a power that could end a war without a single shot. It was a risk. It was the biggest risk the Empire had ever taken. But it was also the first real hope for a different kind of galaxy. The Emperor turned away from the screen and looked at his advisor. The age of Cytherian certainty was over. The age of the unknown had begun. He gave a single, quiet command that would change the course of history. "Open a channel. Let's talk."